what the rich do that the poor overlooks. The rich have a lot of money, you don't say, but they also know how to manage it. They've mastered the art of personal finance and are able to live their lives comfortably without worrying about money. Wouldn't that be great? Here are some things that the rich do that the poor might overlook. They save more than they spend. They live within their means. Surprise, surprise. They don't buy things they can't afford. They spend money on experiences instead of possessions. They invest in themselves and their knowledge base instead of spending all their money on unnecessary things like expensive clothes or cars. Really what it means is that they choose to spend things on what will generate further wealth rather than things that will have a decreasing wealth. For example, a car will only drop in value, but if you buy a living property or something like that, like a vacation home or something, you can sell it after for usually a higher price. So I think they think of their purchases in terms of investments. Okay, so one, the first point, but a really important one. They save diligently and invest wisely. Right, as I said, the rich make saving a habit. They don't just save to save, they do it to make themselves richer. They understand that compounding interest is how the rich get richer. The poor don't bother to save because they think that money doesn't grow on trees. The rich know that money does grow on trees if you plant the right seeds and tend to them properly. Okay, second point. They are not afraid of investing in themselves. If you want to become wealthy, you must invest in yourself first. If you want something bad enough, then you will be willing to pay for it. If there's something you want in life but can't afford, then stop complaining about it and start doing something about it. Right, that's more of the rich mindset. Of course, some people are in terrible position and these kind of things, and they can complain a bit. But if you're gonna complain, then at least do something about it after. So you complain in order to point to where the problem is, and then you go hunt for a solution to a problem. So I think the rich are pretty good at that. So if they complain, it's because they intend to fix something. Okay, third, they spend less time worrying about what others think about them. Right, so this is essential. It's so overlooked, and you think, I don't care what people think. Okay, can you ask for ketchup in a restaurant? Is that hard for you? If it's hard for you, then you care what other people think. Right, so stuff like that, the rich don't worry about. The rich know that what other people think about them doesn't matter as long as they're happy with themselves and their lives. Alright, so that's crucial. That's like the monk fantasy. That's like the Buddha fantasy. The poor are too worried about what others think about them. So they end up living a life based on other people's expectations rather than their own desires and passions. It sounds like a total cliche, and we all know this, but you have to follow that rule. It's like you know the rule, but we don't follow it. So that's problematic. We have to follow the rules, even though it's a cliche to say that. Right. So next point, they work hard to become wealthy. They never refuse. They never confuse. Sorry, I said refuse. They never refuse luck. Yeah, they don't. They never confuse luck with being smart or skilled. They invest in assets that appreciate over time, not liabilities that depreciate over time, right? That's what I said, is that a car will depreciate over time unless it's some kind of collectible or whatever, right? But then you won't use it like a car, it would be more like a museum object in that case. They invest in like factory buildings or living properties. They invest in currencies sometimes. They invest in companies and these kind of things. And things that will last for a long time and a lot of times increase in value. So they don't waste money on frivolous things like expensive clothes, electronics, or jewelry. Right, so you see a lot of rich people, they buy jewelry and these kind of things, maybe for a marriage or whatever, but they are losing from that. They are losing money from doing that things. And most rich people, they don't waste that much time on these kind of things. Right, it's very surprising. They buy things that will last for a long time, and they look for long-term lasting. Although you see this impression of the rich guy maybe today that they waste money on cars and these kind of things. It's only if they're an enthusiast that will work, or if they're like incredibly wealthy that they can afford to lose all of that money. But if you're not rich yet, You can't live that same lifestyle and expect the same result, because they are losing much more than you, but they're also earning much more than you. So that's important to take in consideration. They don't buy new cars unless they can afford them in cash, as I said, right away without incurring debt on their credit cards or loans from the bank, which means they don't drive fancy cars either. So that's a pretty important point, but it can be misinterpreted in a lot of ways, that they don't buy cars unless they can afford them in cash right away without incurring debt on their credit cards. So they might take up a loan from the bank, but they can still pay it down, right? They're able to pay it down, but they still choose to take the loan because they play with the interest, right, in accordance with inflation. So they do some trickery. So you might see really rich people take on a mortgage and these kind of things. Very, very, very interesting. So they save money by living below their means, by using used cars instead of new ones, buying clothes on sale instead of at the full price. And you might think, well, they're rich, they can afford all of this. Well, if they would make themselves afford all of this and buy new all the time, they wouldn't be rich anymore, because they would waste their money on that. The reason they're rich is because they don't do stupid purchases. And now we're talking like above average wealthy people to pretty wealthy people. We're not talking about the richest people in the world here. Remind yourself. I mean, probably you and me, we're not going to be the most rich people in the world, right? By all likelihood, by probability. And we were pretty rich on a historical standard, but we might be rich. We might be rich what is considered well above the average. And well above the average is not wasting a lot of money on stupid stuff, or supposedly stupid stuff. You might have a hobby that you waste some money on, but try to have less expensive hobbies, I suppose. Yeah. All right. So last main point, they spend less than they earn each month, right? That's essential, right? Unless it's an investment or something. But they spend less than they earn each month, so they can use their savings to buy investments that will create more income for them in the future than they could ever earn working for someone else, right? So that's very important. It's a very simple thing. Look at your last month. Did you spend more than you earned? Did you break even, or did you save something? So the rich are saving each month. They are saving, or they, getting capital to invest further with. Right, so they profit each month. That basically personal profiting is that you have more at the end of the month than you came in. You don't break even. You don't use everything. In that sense, you have something in your savings account and investments account and these kind of things. So the rich are different from you and me. They have more money, obviously, but that's not the only thing that separates them from the rest of us. They also have a different attitude towards money and a different approach to spending it. The rich, for instance, don't buy new cars for themselves. They buy for them, for their children or grandchildren. That's usually when they buy cars. And they also think it's a stupid purchase to buy it for your kids, new cars. But that's a different thing. Buy them used cars, because it's just a stupid thing to buy a new one, because you have to pay VAT on it, and you also have to pay for it being new, and it will drop its value just you driving out of the sales place. Right, you buy a new Mercedes and you drive out and it just dropped 10% in value. I mean, that's not a joke even. So the rich don't go out and eat at restaurants. They go to eat with friends and family at restaurants. So for special occasion and these kind of things. You might see them in the papers. They are there at the expensive restaurants, but it's not a common thing like that. They are actually saving a lot by buying the cheaper option that can give you even higher value. Because, I mean, would you go to a restaurant and get a really good burger, or do you want an authentic homemade burger made by your grandma or something? I mean, for me, that's much more valuable. Like a homemade burger made by a family member is always much better, because they know how to cook for personal preferences and these kind of things. You can be much more personal in the cooking also if you cook at home. So the rich don't shop at malls. They invest in real estate, so they can shop at malls without having to pay sales tax on anything they buy there. So they don't shop at malls, but they do shop at malls. But when they buy something, they can avoid the sales tax by buying it through a company or by owning the building, different manipulations of the tax law. So begin manipulating the tax law by doing certain acts that, and you need a good accountant for this. Maybe you're a good accountant, and then you can you need kind of like a creative accountant, not a creative in the sense that they play with the numbers so that you get caught, but that you legally find a way to not pay unnecessary tax, because you already pay income tax, you already pay too much tax, so that you also are going to pay a VAT after you have a taxed income, and then you're going to be taxed again from the purchases. I mean, it's basically a double tax, and on top of that, inflation, right? Unnecessary inflation that even makes the VAT higher. The higher the inflation is, which is created by the government, the higher the VAT will be, right? And the higher this is, the more damage your salary is, which is already taxed from income tax. So this is completely ridiculous that you don't pay 50% in tax. Probably you do. Probably will pay much more than 50% in tax, everybody. And the richest of us who has like 52% tax rates, they probably pay much more. But then again, they are very, very smart people who trick around with the system and the tax laws, which they should try to pay as little tax as possible legally. You should try to pay as little tax as possible. I think that's a very fair thing to say, and if you ask anyone, they would do that themselves. If they could, they would pay less tax if it's legal, right? As you should, because all the tax money is wasted. And the rich knows this, that if you pay to taxes, that's like losing the money. You don't get anything for that. Like, it's complete waste. And you say the government is doing so much great things. It would be way better if it could run around in the free market. If the market could take care of it, we would be way more productive. It's a net loss to have any government that is taxing anyone. So basically, the government is ruining it for us people by existing. They should not exist because they're a net loss. It would be better without it, right? So next point after the preach there, the rich don't buy designer clothes. They pay high prices for custom-made clothing that's perfectly suited to their bodies and lifestyles. Alright, and the rich don't waste time watching television or playing games on their computers. They read books, attend lectures and seminars, meet with friends and associates, exercise regularly, and keep up with current events by reading newspapers and magazines or listening to NPR or some bullshit. But yeah, so that's what the rich does. That's the hobbies of the rich. So if you don't have any of these hobbies, maybe you're not the person who's supposed to be rich. Maybe you're supposed to be like an average salary worker, but if you're interested in money, interested in manipulating the game and finding ways to have people pay money to you and to avoid paying all these kinds of taxes where you're already paying too much. So try to reduce that. That's kind of a moral thing that you have to do, to try to find out how you don't waste money by paying them in taxes, because they will be way more productive if you yourself decided better investments for them.